The military base doesn't exist, not officially. It's a rusted-out corpse of abandoned hardwire, a veritable graveyard of fallen soldiers and crumbling structures. Hidden 12 miles deep in the jungles of South America, there's no reason anybody should be here. None. So why did I find a woman half dead on the ground? It's a question I want answered. She's sitting across from me. Her eyes are downcast, her blouse is torn, and her copper cheeks are flecked with spots of red. I don't know if the blood belongs to her or somebody else, but I figure by the end of this, I'll have a pretty good idea. "Tourist?" I ask. She gives me a hard stare. It's quiet, unyielding. She's not certain who I am, and judging by the look in her eyes, she's running a series of probabilities. It's the black suit that does it. Always. People see the suit, they see the briefcase, and their imagination spins into overdrive. I try another question. "Did you come alone?" She shakes her head. Her mouth is a thin line, defiant and uneasy. The legs of her chair squeal as she rocks back and forth, giving motion to her anxiety. She's considering the possibility that this is her last day on Earth, her last hour. If I'm being honest, it might be. "How many were with you?" "Lots," she says quickly. "They're still around. They know where I am, know where we are right now, and—" "I doubt that." Her voice stumbles. "If anybody was with you, then chances are they're already dead. Jobs like this, they're usually bloodbaths, massacres. They're not the sort of places you expect to find survivors, much less unarmed ones." She swallows. "Who are you?" "A friend." "Some friend? I don't know the first thing about you." "Funny. I was about to say the same thing." I reach into my briefcase and pull out my clipboard, centering it on my lap. On it are questions. They're the sort of questions whose answers are typically written in blood. "How about you and I get to know each other?" "If you think I'm going to just tell you who I am..." "I don't care who you are. I care about what you're doing here, miles deep in the jungle, sitting in a military base that doesn't exist." I press my pen to the clipboard. "How about you fill me in?" The woman's eyes narrow. Her slender hands ball into tight fists. If I had to guess, she's not used to feeling this vulnerable, this powerless. "And if I leave?" she says, standing up. "What then? Are you going to cuff me to a pipe?" I smile. "Why bother?" The corner of her mouth twitches. "You're not going to leave," I tell her. "You wouldn't dare." For a moment, my eyes dance with hers, and in their fire I see something, some buried ember of fear. It's unmistakable. "You know better than I do what's out there," I say. "So go ahead. Walk out that door if you think you're safer outside. I won't stop you." I wait for her to move, but she hesitates. They always hesitate. "Maybe you're right," I say. "Maybe I'm not a friend, but I'm the closest thing you'll find to one for miles. So if I were you, I'd quit worrying about me. I'd start worrying about what it is I'm doing here." "Meaning?" I wave my hand toward the broken window. Outside are rusted Humvees, a crumbling barracks. Outside is a road so overgrown that tiny trees are sprouting from cracks in the concrete, while clutches of moss do their best to hide old rifle rounds. It means that places like this aren't left to rot without a good reason. Soldiers are trained to fight. They aren't trained to flee into the jungle, leaving their equipment and assets behind. I gesture broadly. Look around. This base was evacuated in a hurry, and that begs the question, why? More importantly, why did I find you in the middle of it? Her eyes dart outside. Her pupils are dilated in a cocktail of adrenaline and anxiety. If I tell you, then you've got to tell me something first. Tell you what? Who are you? She says, voice trembling. I want to know what's really going on here. The truth. I've been lied to enough today. Have you? I study her. The truth of my work isn't something people want to hear about. Not really. They might think they do. They might think they're ready to open Pandora's box, to see the dark underbelly of reality, but it's rarely the case. Still, the woman strikes me as stubborn. If pulling back the veil can get her talking, then maybe it's worth the existential crisis. I slip a hand inside my jacket, pull out my badge, and toss it to her. She catches it, just barely. "There you go," I say. "Everything you need to know about me, right down to my height and birthday." She appraises the badge. Her eyes move across the laminate once, twice, then snap back up to me. "This says you work for an organization called the Facility. I've never heard of it." "That's the idea. We're a shadow contractor. The less people know about us, the easier it is to do our job." "And what is that job?" "Anomalies," I tell her. "We investigate events of supernatural origin. They're typically caused by entities, things you'd recognize as monsters or urban legends. My job is to hunt those things, capture them." She shakes her head. "Why?" "That's a complicated question. The short answer is that it's necessary. The long answer is that you'll sleep better not knowing." I lean forward, flaring my jacket behind me, letting the woman get a glimpse of the pistol on my hip. "Fact is, I came here tonight to investigate an event, but instead I found you. I'd like to know why that is." Her eyes drift to the window. She's wearing the expression of a woman who was praying her nightmare was all in her head, that whatever she saw today was the product of acute psychosis, a little bit of neurological sabotage and nothing else. Now she's considering that maybe there's something more here. Maybe she's not as crazy as she hoped she was. "What's your name?" I ask. She bites her lip. Her voice is quiet, almost a whisper. "Maria." "You look like you're having a hard time processing things, Maria." "You don't know what I saw," she mutters. "You have no idea." "I hear that a lot." I pull out a pack of smokes, slip one between my lips. I light it up, and the nicotine tastes sweeter than heroin. It ripples through my body like emotional morphine, and just like that, the next part gets a little easier. "Between you and me, my father was killed by an entity, Maria. I watched him die." Her eyes meet mine. They're wide. This wasn't the emotional curveball she was expecting, and that's exactly what makes it effective. Always. "Happened when I was 7, I tell her. "I saw the whole thing from under my bed, cowering. A creature had him in its grip, some tall man with 2 faces. He lifted him up to the ceiling and turned to me, asked what my favorite nightmare was, and then he tore my father in 2, like paper mache." I blow out a plume of smoke and it hangs in the air between us. Then I take another long drag. The truth is, I hate this story. I hate it more than anything else in the entire world. It's a memory I've gone my entire life trying to forget. But in moments like these, it's the most valuable piece of history I own. Even now, it's working its black magic. I watch Maria's posture shift. Her shoulders fall, slumping forward in horrified disbelief. She's doing the human thing and empathizing with me, sharing a piece of my pain. And that's exactly what I need her to do. "Is that how this so-called facility found you?" she asks. "It is." Her eyes are staring a hole into the concrete floor. She looks distant, haunted. "I'm so sorry," she says. I ash my cigarette. "Don't be. It's ancient history. The point I'm trying to make is that when you've seen an entity kill somebody, it stays with you. You recognize the scars. And right now, I see those scars all over your face." She doesn't speak. She looks out the window, out across the military ruins to a rusty steel wheel rising from the dirt. It's bolted to a hatch that leads underground, one she's been stealing glances at for the better part of our conversation. "That bunker," I say. "I found you lying beside it, bleeding and barely conscious. Something happened down there, didn't it?" A moment passes. Her eyes are narrowed in focus, like she's weighing her options, calculating outcomes. Eventually, she takes a breath and asks a question. "You said that you hunted entities. Well, what about demons?" "What about them?" "Do they exist?" I crack a grin. "Depends who you ask. Are you saying that you saw one down there?" "I'm not sure," she says at length.
Maybe not a demon, but something like it.
She stops. Her teeth dig into her lip. And then she says something that shocks even me.
I think I saw the devil. Satan.
Satan? I say, whistling. Now that'd be something.
You think I'm nuts.
She mutters, shaking her head.
I knew you would. Everyone will.
I don't think you're nuts. Not yet. I take one last drag on my cigarette, burn it to the filter, and flick it to the floor. The truth is, the facility's been tracking strange activity in the area. A lot of it. Entities are being drawn to this base, being pulled in from nearby regions like moths to a flame, only to vanish without a trace. I'm talking about heavy hitters, nightmare fuel. These aren't the sort of entities that we can destroy, much less contain. So the fact that they're dropping off the face of the earth is starting to get concerning. I thumb to the broken window. This base is the Bermuda Triangle for boogeymen. I'm here to find out why. She shrinks in her seat.
Jesus, do you think it has something to do with what I saw?
Maybe, maybe not. I won't know until I get more details. And that means I need to know what you're doing here.
Here?
She says, glancing at the bunker.
Get me out of here. I'll tell you whatever you want.
Not possible. We do this before nightfall. There's no other way. What Maria doesn't realize is that this entity likely already has her scent. Sooner or later, it's going to return for her. When that happens, I need every advantage I can get. And that means understanding just what happened here.
Hang on,
she sputters.
What happens at nightfall?
Keep derailing my investigation and you'll find out. I scratch her name onto the clipboard. Now start talking. We're losing daylight. She runs a frantic hand through her hair.
Christ. All right,
she says, voice cracking.
Let me think for a second. It started a couple weeks ago, I think. A reader sent in a tip about this place.
Slow down. A reader?
Right. Fuck. I'm a journalist. I work for an online paper, and we solicit tips for our stories. Usually scandals, corruption. It's mostly political stuff. But a couple weeks back, a man sent in something bizarre.
That man have a name?
John.
Just John? Her voice breaks.
Yes.
I write it down. She continues.
John said he'd been hearing screaming, that his whole village had, coming from somewhere in the jungle nearby. Military was in the area. They were sending convoys through the village in the dead of night, with their headlights off to avoid drawing attention to themselves. Apparently, they were all driving up an old road, one that hadn't been used in decades. John knew the road. He knew it led to an old military base, one that used to conduct illegal experiments.
I lean back. What kind of experiments?
The human kind. Genetic stuff. DNA splicing, mutating, you name it.
Seems weird John would know that.
He used to work there,
she explains.
A long time ago, during the Cold War.
I frown. The nearest village is 12 miles away. Nobody is hearing screaming at that distance.
That's just it. They didn't hear screaming from the base. They heard it from the jungle. John said it sounded just like it used to when he worked there. Guttural, animalistic. He could tell that the people screaming had been experimented on, and that they were being let loose in the jungle.
Let loose?
Yeah. I guess they'd send out test subjects, then release other experiments, more advanced ones, to hunt them down.
What for? To test their capabilities?
Partly,
she says darkly.
But mostly for food.
I chew on the tip of my pen. Cannibal humans, genetic testing, a massive military cover-up. Sounds like Pulitzer Prize material. She folds her arm and gives me a scathing look.
Is that sarcasm?
Not at all. Give me John's age.
Not sure,
she says.
70 maybe? He was in good shape. Fit, but he looked rough.
Rough?
I just mean he looked like he'd been through the ringer. Had a hard life. His skin was leather, and he was missing half of his teeth. His hair was a tangled mess. I'm pretty sure I saw lice moving in his beard.
She pauses.
And his eyes. His eyes were unnerving.
Describe them.
Well, they were pale. Paler than the moon. And every so often they'd sort of pulse, almost bulge out of their sockets. I hate to say it, but he looked freaky.
And John brought you here, to this base? She nods. And where's John now?
He's
Maria's eyes drift to the bunker.
dead. Down there.
I follow her gaze and the steel hatch is turning crimson in the setting sun. My stomach twists. What I don't tell Maria is that entities are most active after nightfall. If I don't solve this mystery soon, then the answer is likely going to come find us, and I'm not sure I like our chances of survival. That hatch, I say. I'm guessing that's how you and John entered the bunker.
Yes.
Describe the interior. Maria takes a second. She furrows her eyebrows, as though thinking back.
It was narrow,
She says slowly.
like a tall cylinder. I remember standing at the top of the hatch and looking down into a dark pit that stretched forever. John got on the ladder and told me to follow. He said it'd be a bit of a descent, but once we were down there, he was certain we'd find the evidence we'd need to blow the conspiracy wide open.
What state was the bunker in? I asked. John implied operations had resumed, but did it appear that way?
No,
She says.
frankly, the condition was awful. It looked like the bunker had been abandoned since the Cold War. Moss crept up the walls and the ladder rattled with every step we took. The place was a death trap. Every time I put my foot down, I half expected the ladder to snap.
Odd. One would think John would clue in after seeing the state of the bunker, that it wasn't fit for operation. Then again, John strikes me as a man not altogether there. He might have been mentally ill, out of his mind, based on Maria's description of him, the pale eyes, chilling demeanor. I can't help but wonder if John wasn't so much an employee of the program as he was a test subject. Maria continues.
About 50 feet down the ladder, we started to see catwalks. Dozens of them. They extended off the ladder in every direction, leading to various entrances along the interior.
She trails off, as if collecting her thoughts. When she speaks again, her voice is hoarse, quiet.
The entrances were welded shut. All of them. It's like they were trying to keep something trapped inside. Like they didn't want it getting out.
All of the entrances? I ask.
No,
She says, tugging nervously at her sleeve.
not all of them. One was different. We found it at the bottom of the ladder, half submerged in rainwater. The flooding only came up to our knees, so we were able to wade through easily enough, but
Her fingers dance across her jeans. They pick at the fabric. But what?
it was torn open.
She breathes.
The entrance, I mean. It was warped outward, like something had clawed its way out of the bunker, pulled it apart like a tin can. I'm talking about inches of steel here, enough to shrug off the shockwave of a nuclear warhead. I mean, fuck, what could do that?
For the first time, I feel the ghost of fear creep through me. It's subtle, insidious. If what she's describing is true, then there are 2, maybe 3 entities I'm aware of with that capability. All 3 are impossibly violent, vicious. Official policy is to avoid contact at all costs. If such avoidance isn't possible, then policy dictates the elimination of all witnesses to ensure the preservation of social order. I look to Maria. She's covered in bruises, blood, and judging by the way she's cradling her arm, probably has at least 1 fracture. She's already suffered a nightmare. I wonder if I'll have the courage to put her down if the time comes. The door, I say, hoping she doesn't hear my voice crack. John used to work there. He must have had thoughts on the damage. She snorts.
He said it was explosive charges. He said the military probably breached the door to get inside when they restarted their science project. But I knew that couldn't be true. First of all, the door was warped outward, not inward. More than that, there wasn't a shred of explosive damage in the area.
I'm assuming these were observations you shared.
Of course. John didn't care though. Just changed the subject. Asked me if I had any skeletons in my closet. Asked me if I'd ever hurt people, or considered it, and...
What?
Yeah, I know.
She says. laughing in disbelief.
Talk about a left turn into what the fuck. I shrugged it off. I mean, I knew John had demons in his past. Maybe he was looking for a little absolution from me. It's not like he sounded threatening. He almost asked the questions casually, like he was hoping we could start a conversation. Forgive each other for our sins, sort of thing. He didn't press the subject. Maybe if he had, though, things would have been different.
She sighs. Her eyes shift to the bunker, hazy with memories.
He helped me squeeze through the damaged doorway, and we continued on. All the passages were flooded down there, utterly dark. We sloshed through countless corridors, our headlamps reflecting off the black water and making shadows against the walls. It creeped me out. It felt like we weren't alone down there, because I'd keep seeing movement out of the corner of my eye.
Movement. I wonder if she really was just seeing things, or if there had been something down there, stalking them even then.
Anything stand out as interesting in those corridors? In some sense, all of it was interesting,
she says.
The whole place was like a buried time capsule. In the rooms we passed, I saw ancient magazines and peeling posters. I saw little relics from the 70s or earlier, some floating in the water, others sitting on dusty tables and countertops. Even keepsakes, little lockets, wedding rings. Even the desks were full of soggy documents, classified ones. Seemed strange they'd just leave all that behind.
She takes a deep breath.
We'd passed through a series of maze-like corridors, then climbed a ladder that finally got us out of that floodwater. It felt nice to be on dry ground again, but the new chamber...
A shiver runs through her.
It was narrow to the point of being claustrophobic, and all along its walls were streaks of dark paint. The air felt musty, rancid, but it wasn't until we turned that corner that...
She stops suddenly, her expression paling.
Maria,
I press.
What happened when you turned the corner?
Thanks for listening. If you enjoy these stories, be sure to subscribe to the podcast and check out some more of my episodes here.